2024 marks the 100th anniversary of the Royal Canadian Air Force, and one of the largest commemorative events of the season was held at CFB Trenton, the largest Canadian Air Force base. Welcome to Canada. For the first time, Airshow Dispatches touches down in this great country, and we are here for the Quinte International Airshow, one of the biggest Canadian shows of the year. A big static display on the ground, as you can see, including almost every type of fixed-wing asset in Canadian service, but we are here for the action in the air. Let's take a look at the running order. A fairly modest lineup, it all fits onto just one page. We start with the visiting military acts, the Frecce Tricolori and American F-16. Then a collection of very rare Warbirds, the Royal Canadian Air Force solo displays next, and we end with the Snowbirds. First up, the stars of the show for many, the Frecce Tricolori. This is the Frecce's first visit to North America for over 30 years. They previously visited in 1986 and 1992. They're here partly to mark the 100th anniversary of the Royal Canadian Air Force and partly to mark 500 years since Giovanni de Verrazzano's expedition to America in 1524. So, up into the first of their famous 4 versus 4 split and crossover manoeuvres. This one is called the Cardioid. They fly the Airmacchi MB339, or the AT339 as it's technically known in Italian military service. It's a military jet trainer and light attack aircraft developed in the 1970s, which has been used around the world, but Italy is now the last major military operator. The versions used by the Frecce Tricolori are slightly modified. They are known as the MB339PAN. They have removable tip tanks for better roll performance and, of course, smoke systems. Now the fan rolls, followed by another split called Apollo 313. You'll notice the aircraft are carrying 2 underwing pods. One of those pods is filled with white smoke oil, and the other is carrying either red, white or green to create the Italian tricolor. But white smoke here to create a heart, and the Frecce demonstrating one of their more unusual manoeuvres, because they are the only jet aerobatic team in the world to draw the heart from bottom to top. You'll notice a mix of camera angles here. Most of this footage has been recorded from within the showground, not too far from show centre, but some has been recorded from the runway threshold just off the extended centre line, providing an interesting extra perspective, and that is an angle that we'll enjoy periodically throughout this programme. The Frecce Tricolori was formed in 1961, initially flying the F-86 and later the Fiat G91. Regular viewers will remember seeing the newly restored Fiat G91 in Frecce Tricolori colours, making its post-restoration airshow debut at Pratica di Mare last year as part of our episode on the Italian Air Force centenary. But the team has been flying the MB339 for quite a long time now, ever since 1982. It remains a perfect aircraft for formation aerobatics, straight wings to give plenty of structure to the formation shapes, a very good turning circle both during positive and negative G turns, fantastic low speed handling, and it can do this, one of the few jets able to perform a Lomshevak. And here a brilliant Frecce Tricolori manoeuvre, rollbacks first and then up into a loop. Over the top of the loop in pyramid formation and then entering a 9-ship downwards bomb burst. But it's not over yet. The aircraft charge away from us before pulling up into half horizontals to converge on show centre. There are other aerobatic teams that do the sort of thing we're about to see, but none of them with quite so many aircraft. This will be a 9-ship, multi-directional crossover. And to close the show, the Frecce Tricolori's trademark. They are about to draw the longest Italian flag in the world, a flag that will cover some 5 kilometres of ground track in a manoeuvre called Alona, or Big Wing. Well, what a way that was to start our programme, but on now to our second foreign military contribution, and it's time now for the Viper demonstration team from the US Air Force. The team flies an F-16CM, a Block 50 F-16C. The M suffix indicates that it's been put through the CCIP upgrade programme, which involved fitting new data link, interrogator transponder systems, a joint helmet-mounted queuing system, and a FLIR targeting pod. So a modern aircraft internally, but as can be seen from the paint scheme, an aeroplane with a very long lineage. It was some 50 years ago that the prototype YF-16 took to the air for the very first time. That first flight occurred unexpectedly when it lost control during a fast taxi test. Many skeptics at the time concluded that the F-16's revolutionary fly-by-wire system was simply not fit for purpose, but the following year the F-16 silenced its critics with a spellbinding display at the Paris Air Show. This paint scheme harks back to the early days. It is a tribute to the scheme worn by the YF-16 prototype. It was painted up in secret at Edwards Air Force Base and unveiled to the public in mid-May as the primary display jet for the Viper demo team this season. High alpha pass here, and this was a pretty new trick when the F-16 burst onto the airshow circuit in the summer of 1975, made possible by the fly-by-wire, of course. The computer's working hard to move the control surfaces and keep the aircraft stable in this high alpha regime, while the throttle is used to maintain altitude. paint scheme looks wonderful and the flying is crisp and precise. The display overall, however, is lacking a little bit of variety and panache. Several manoeuvres were repeated, such as the hesitation roll and knife edge pass, and there were no fewer than 4 flat non-aerobatic high-speed passes. You'll notice there is much less variety and longer, less time-efficient repositioning manoeuvres than we are used to seeing from other F-16 displays around the world, the Belgians, the Danish and the Turks, for example. But here's something that the North American display teams always do exceptionally well: a dedication pass. Time for some Warbirds now, and here go 6 of them launching into the air. The Warbird segment was fairly tame, no tail chasing, no aerobatics. In fact, we didn't even get to see the right-hand side of the aircraft because every single flyby was in the same direction. But nonetheless, what a collection this is. Hurricane, Spitfire, Mustang, Lancaster, Mitchell and Firefly.
No, it's just like it's basically like a creative way to do things. You're just flying points. I'll have to complete the missions, and I'm assuming if I do, I'll get full access to the plane. I can also
The fighters in now for a run and break. The three fighters come from the Victory flight. The leading Hurricane was built as a Mark 12 in 1942 and it was used during the war in Canada to deter Japanese balloon attacks. The Spitfire is an ex-South African Air Force Mark 9, but it's painted in Canadian colours, representing an aircraft that was lost on D-Day. And here, a Mustang Mark IV, the Commonwealth designation for the P-51D. This one was delivered to the Canadian Air Force post-war. The bombers come from the Canadian Warplane Heritage Museum. In first, the Lancaster Mark V, one of just two airworthy Lancasters globally. This one was built post-war and served with the Canadian Air Force into the 1950s. Here, the B-25J Mitchell, painted in British colours, but the aircraft never actually saw military service. And finally, the Firefly Mark VI, a carrier-borne fighter. This one was built in 1951 and served with the British and Australian navies, but Canada also operated a small number of Fireflies in the post-war period. So as we say farewell to the Warbirds, we turn to the other civilian performers to entertain us. And first up, it's the Northern Stars. It's a method of takeoff that should be very familiar to our regular viewers. Exactly the same manoeuvre performed by Grupa Acrobacyjna Żelazny, the soloist departing and then going into a half Cuban and setting up for a very low-level opposition pass. The aircraft are all Pitts S2Bs. The Pitts Special in general is actually a similar age to some of the Warbirds we've just seen, but the S2B is a little bit more modern than that, and it's typically fitted with an engine at least twice as powerful as what you'd find on the very earliest Pitts, 260 horsepower as standard. This is quite an imaginative display, and a very well executed one, which should come as no surprise because two of the team pilots are former Snowbirds. The leader, Brent Handy, now rolls inverted and commences a very challenging mirror formation half roll. Such that on the exit, the leader is now in erect flight and it is the wingmen that are upside down. The Northern Stars are a relatively new team formed in 2019. Their long-term plan is to display as a four-ship. A downwards bomb burst to split the team 3 ways. And they will now converge towards each other for an opposition pass, with 2 aircraft flying in opposing directions along the A axis and the third arriving on the B axis. And they too feature a dedication pass towards the end of their act, concluding a very enjoyable display. Our final civilian performer is Kyle Fowler in the Acro Ease. This, one of the more widespread designs of Burt Rutan, with more than 800 of them having been built. And it still looks like a vision of the future, but actually the design dates back to the mid-1970s. It's a very low drag, aerodynamically efficient design indeed. Only 160 horsepower, but because it's so light and because it's so slippery, it can still cruise at 160 knots. Into the Canadian military participants now to take us through to the end of the programme, but it's not the Air Force to whom we turn first, rather the Canadian Army, as the Skyhawks parachute team jump from a CC-130J Hercules. The Skyhawks were given a rather long slot at Trenton, a full hour in fact. So to string their display out to the required time, they split their performance into several small jumps of 3 or 4 parachutists each. The first included the flags of both the nation of Canada and the Air Force Centenary, and then things started to get dynamic with some impressive canopy relative work, often using their legs to physically lock themselves together. This is a Skyhawk staple called the Candy Cane. The challenge is to perform as many orbits as possible before the smoke runs out. Their jump ship is what's known in Canadian service as a CC-130J, to the rest of the world a C-130J-30, that's the stretched version of the Super Hercules. The Royal Canadian Air Force operates 17 of them. They are primarily tasked with tactical airlift, including the parachute insertion of troops as we see demonstrated in this performance, but they're also tasked with search and rescue duties. In addition to the CC-130J, Canada also operates a smaller fleet of what they call standard CC-130s. They're actually C-130Es, and they are used both for search and rescue and for aerial refuelling. With the Skyhawks on the ground, the CC-130J performed a couple of photogenic flypasts before coming in to land. This one comes from the 426th Squadron, and it's based here at CFB Trenton. There's two broad types of airlift, tactical and strategic. Tactical airlift concerns complex, high-precision operations, often involving relatively modest quantities of cargo, and as such, tactical airlifters can get away with being a little bit smaller, but they are expected to have excellent stall performance, for example, and we're going to see that demonstrated here. The other broad type of airlift is strategic airlift. This generally includes higher frequency but less specialised missions with larger loads of cargo. Canada's strategic airlifter is the CC-177 Globemaster, and like the C-130J we just saw, this aircraft is also based here at Trenton, this time as part of 429 Squadron. Canada operates 5 CC-177s, all are of the extended range variant fitted with an additional central fuel tank. Of those 5 aircraft, incredibly no fewer than 3 of them participated in the Quinte Airshow, 2 on static display and 1 in the flying display. Before they procured the Globemaster, the Canadian Air Force relied on leasing civilian airlifters or requesting support from other nations to fulfill its strategic airlift capability. That wasn't really sufficient, and so in 2007, Canada ordered 4 Globemasters and then added a 5th in 2015. They've been deployed numerous times since then, often on humanitarian missions including earthquake relief in Haiti and hurricane relief in the Philippines, and they've also been used to support NATO-led operations in Afghanistan. You might wonder why it's called the CC-177 rather than the C-17. That's because the Canadian military registration system requires a 3-digit aircraft identifier followed by a 3-digit unique airframe identifier. So aircraft like the C-17 and the F-18, which normally only have 2 digits, get the final digit repeated so as to fit the Canadian format. Here, a roll demonstration from a CH-146 Griffon, the Canadian military designation for the Bell 412EP, which is itself a derivative of the Huey. The force operates 85 Griffons, of which the vast majority are painted green and are used for light transport and liaison. Some of them have also been fitted with a Dillon Aero minigun to serve as armed escorts for the Chinook. But 15 of the Griffons are painted yellow and they're fitted out for search and rescue duties. Like quite a lot of Canadian military equipment, the Griffon has been kept in service for quite a bit longer than intended. Originally due to retire in 2021, Canada has recently signed an agreement with Bell for a modernisation and life extension programme, and that should keep the Griffon operational into the early 2030s. The final RCAF solo display comes from the CF-188A Hornet, an entertaining solo sequence, and as you'll see, a special heritage formation will follow. For the first time since 2018, the display jet is wearing a full-colour paint scheme, and this rather intricate design marks the Air Force centenary with cog motifs near the tail, binary code over the wings, and modern computer circuitry towards the nose. If you look carefully, you might be able to make out that this aircraft has a searchlight just under the left-hand side of the cockpit. That is used to light up unidentified aircraft during night interception missions. Originally, that searchlight was one of the things that differentiated a Canadian CF-18 from a standard FA-18, although many of the CF-18s have since had their searchlights removed. good demonstration in this display of the Hornet's excellent high alpha capabilities, still impressive today, but particularly so in comparison to other aircraft designed in the 1970s. That is partly thanks to the leading-edge root extensions, which not only generate lift in their own right, but they also help create vortices over the main wing, increasing the lift properties of the wing and reducing the aircraft's stall speed. Also helping with high alpha performance are the twin tails, with the vertical stabilisers canted out slightly. That wasn't a very common configuration back in the 1970s, but it helped provide much needed stability in those high alpha flight regimes. The Hornet is Canada's sole fast jet, aside from the Tutors used by the Snowbirds, and much like the Tutor, the Hornet has already gone far beyond its use-by date. 138 A and B model jets were originally delivered, but they're all rather elderly now, and some of them have had to be withdrawn from use. The fleet has been partially supplemented with a number of second-hand ex-Australian jets, which do have a little more fatigue life remaining. Around 80 Hornets continue in Canadian service, of which only 36 are fitted with modern radar, although an ongoing upgrade program is tackling that issue. The Hornet will have to continue to serve for quite a few years yet with the Royal Canadian Air Force after a very protracted procurement process. The F-35A Lightning has finally been selected as the Hornet's successor, and the first are due to arrive in 2026, although 2 squadrons of upgraded Hornets will need to remain in use until at least 2032. Here we see what's been dubbed as a victory flight featuring 3 of the Warbirds we saw earlier on. Although the CF-18 demo team has performed occasional 2-ship heritage flights before, this is the first time they've undertaken a 4-ship, and it will be performed at a small handful of Canadian shows in 2024. Finally, it's time for the Snowbirds to close the show. When we last saw them, they were flying a reduced 8-ship sequence, but they're now back to their full 9-ship strength for 2024. Unfortunately, the Snowbirds had a torrid weekend. One display was cancelled due to weather, the other was disrupted by multiple technical faults and by an aircraft accidentally entering cloud. After several delays, the team finally finished their show as a reduced 8-ship formation. The practice display too was heavily disrupted, with 2 jets having to break off and land over the course of the rehearsal. But we've cobbled together footage from both the Friday practice and the Sunday airshow to present to you the fullest version of the Snowbirds display possible. The Snowbirds trace their roots back to 1967 and an 8-ship team of tutors called the Golden Centenaires. They were established to perform for 1 season only to mark 100 years of Canadian independence. Although the team only existed for 1 year, in 1969 they were informally reformed to perform flypasts and non-aerobatic displays, and a couple of years later they became an official display team and gained the name Snowbirds. Little has changed since then. The aircraft certainly haven't changed. In fact, of all of the military national aerobatic teams globally, these are the oldest jets in use by any of them. Many of the individual airframes seen in this performance are more than 50 years old, and they've been flying for more than half of the Royal Canadian Air Force's entire history. While the tutor has long been retired from the training role, they've been retained for the Snowbirds. They've been the subject of several life extension programs, which it is hoped will enable them to keep flying until around 2030. That's 20 years after the initial retirement date. The latest upgrades, which are currently underway, include the addition of glass cockpits and new avionics. You'll notice a mix of high show and low show manoeuvres here. That's because of the footage being combined from 2 different days. But of course some of the classic Snowbirds moves make it into both versions of the demonstration, such as this one, the lag back cross. It's interesting, the Snowbirds display largely follows the typical European style of starting with a formation segment with all the aircraft together, and then going into a more dynamic second half with alternating groups of smaller aircraft. What's quite unusual though is that at the end of the show, all 9 jets get back together for what can best be described as a series of parade-style passes, non-aerobatic and sort of lacking the flow of the rest of the show up until that point. And as we enjoy another of these shots from the runway threshold taken during Friday's practice session, we must say thank you to our friends at Airshow Stuff, who stepped in to provide a backup camera when ours was unavailable. This Friday footage would simply not exist without their assistance. So as the Snowbirds run in for their final break, that just about concludes our look back at the Quinte International Airshow 2024, and it also concludes our first foray into Canada. The first, but hopefully not the last. Airshow Dispatches will take a break for a while, but the next episode will probably be along in September, and that will feature Air Legend 2024. Until then, thank you very much for your company, and from me, Adam Landau, it's goodbye for now.